This week you have me as host, and I have a wonderful guest, Betty, who I'm going to have a chat with Betty about our app, Betty's life, tinnitus, and how tinnitus impacted her life, being a musician, and getting on with life, and how we were able to support Betty and moving on. We will have time for questions later on, but if you've got questions for Betty as we're chatting, um, please put them in the questions. We will see them and we'll get on with them as we can. So can I just take a few seconds just to say thank you to Betty for joining us. Betty has been somebody that I've known just for a little while, but we've made immediate connection. I think we're kind of kindred spirits across the water. And she and I have spent some time in the one-to-one therapy sessions that Otto offers. But Betty started using the app quite a long time ago and then came to the one-to-one sessions a little later. Um, Otto, as I'm sure you know, has an app which we developed over years. I, as the hearing therapist audiologist, wrote all of the content in the app. So the app is full of my experience and my work and my passion over the last 43 years. So everything that you experience in the app, all the sessions that you go through have been sessions that I've written based on the best practice that we have, that we know. It's a blended therapeutic approach, so using all sorts of ideas from pain management to tinnitus counselling to CBT and ACT and all sorts of things in between, from physical stretching to sleep preparation and sleep therapy. We've used guidance from specialists when we need to deliver the app, and then we've got a huge team, a small team, not a huge team, small team of amazingly talented people who have put all of my ideas and all my thoughts into an app. We have Lily's voice and Jake, who is co-hosting with me tonight, who does all the sound work. And some of the sound work in the app is innovative in our spatial sound work and in our urban sounds that we have in the library. So if you haven't had a play through the app, I would highly recommend that you check through the explore button and see what you can find. Hopefully you'll find something on the app which will help you um, learn to habituate towards tinnitus. We know that habituation is the only proven cure for tinnitus. There is no medical cure, there is no surgical cure, but habituation is the only thing that we know works. So we're here today to talk about Betty's journey. So let me go straight to Betty and say, Betty, can you talk about you and introduce yourself a little for everybody?
Well, sure. I'm really happy to be here today and talking with you. And I guess you could say my tinnitus story begins. I was realizing over 40 years ago when I first started experiencing it. And for 50 years, I was a professional concert musician. I played the viola, and I still do a little bit, but not professionally. And I played I was a freelance musician in Boston, but let's see, I started uh, in the early 70s. Some friends got together and started a chamber music group in New Hampshire on an old farm, and I that's where I was for 24 years. We had a musicians, I guess you could say, commune, and we played concerts together during the school year, and in the summer we had students come from all over the world to study chamber music with us. Chamber music was my real love, And I was very fortunate to travel all around the world, playing chamber music, giving scholarships, and going to ambassadors' homes and playing house concerts and meeting people like the Queen Noor of Jordan and such people. I also played with Yo-Yo Ma. I played in a string quartet
That's
because we went to this.
fantastic.
Yeah, he was wonderful, obviously, and my mother and he attended the same church. It was the church I grew up going to in Winchester, Massachusetts, and so that's how I got to meet him and play with him. And I've also been a soloist with organizations like Boston Pops and et cetera, et cetera. So, and I feel very grateful for all the wonderful music and people that I've known because of my musical life. And I started losing my hearing in my early 50s was when it first started being a problem. And by the time I was 65, I realized that I it was getting more challenging for me to participate in uh, and playing professionally. And I knew situations where I knew of people who had started to lose their hearing and their puts their colleagues in a very difficult position because they need to step down. And I didn't want to put anyone in that awkward position. So I decided I wanted to be the one to decide. So I decided it was time to retire. So tinnitus, the part that tinnitus plays and all that is that in my early 50s, or I guess it was my late 40s, I started experiencing tinnitus. And when I look back on it now, it doesn't seem like that big a deal. But because it was the first tinnitus I had, and because I was a musician, I was very startled and disturbed by it. And it sounded like tape hiss before Dolby came along. It took away tape hiss. So it was a loud hissing sound. And it meant that I wasn't going to be able to hear. I think what disturbed me most about it was that it meant that I wouldn't be able to hear silence anymore. I guess that's kind of an oxymoron to talk about hearing silence,
Hearing silence.
but and I at that time, so I went to see an ENT, and I think a lot of us have. It's typical of a lot of people's stories is that and when I told him about tinnitus, he said, "Well, there's nothing we can do about that."
Mm.
And so that was very discouraging. And I got a white noise machine to help me fall asleep. I joined the ATA, the American Tinnitus Association. There were support groups, but I realized that the more I thought about and talked about tinnitus at that time, the more it bothered me. So I realized it was better to kind of take a back seat and not think about it too much. And I did habituate over time. And then over the years, more and more tinnituses. I don't know whether it's the pluralist, tinnituses or tinnitus, but anyway, I had more versions of tinnitus that came along. And so it started with a tape hiss, then later on came a vacuum cleaner sound, and it's gotten worse. And as I've gotten older, I'm 77 years old now. So in the last decade, I'd say it's when it's really gotten worse. And then there was a waterfall, and but the worst, what felt like the most calamitous was a year ago, January. I got this out of the blue, this very, very, very loud tinnitus that was excruciating. And part of the problem was that it had a pitch. It was a very clear pitch. It was a C. And it sounded like a old-fashioned fluorescent light bulb that was about to go out. So it was very, very buzzy. And I thought, this is just horrible. I don't know how I can bear it. I don't know how I can stand this. And I was definitely feeling suicidal because I couldn't figure out a way to get out of this. And then in February, I thought that was bad. I had another tinnitus in my other ear that was even louder, and it was an F sharp. Ironically, that interval C to F sharp, which is a tritone, is in medieval music was called Diabolus musicus, the devil in
Devil's
music.
music. Yeah.
So that's what I was hearing was this interval of the tritone constantly. And it got to the point where I thought to myself, it was so awful. I'd say, can I get through the next moment? Yes, I can get through the next moment. Can I get through the next moment? Yes, I can get through the next moment. But I couldn't look ahead because that felt unbearable. I was so desperate. And one night, I really felt like I was in crisis. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know if I was going to go to the emergency room or what. But I went online and I had already done research on tinnitus online, but this night I was just so desperate. And I came across the Auto app, and thank goodness I did because it was a true lifesaver. When I found the Auto app and I signed up and I started doing the program, I thought these people are amazing. They have really thought this through and are offering something really valuable. And 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 what I loved, there were several things I loved. One thing I loved is that it was a multidisciplinary approach. It wasn't just, I mean, a lot of the apps I looked at were just masking sounds. It was just masking sounds. And masking sounds can be very helpful, and you've got a great selection of masking sounds on the app. But it wasn't just that, it was this whole very well thought out program, step by step, and combining CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and meditation, visualization, and all kinds of approaches, counted breathing. And I felt this what was projected through the app was real honest empathy and caring, which I had not found anywhere else. And so I think that in terms of therapy, I think that when you project that, that's a big part of the therapy. I really do, because tinnitus is so isolating, because
Yeah.
unless you've
Yeah.
experienced it, you don't understand how debilitating it can be.
Mm.
And so that so I think that's missing in a lot of therapies that are offered, is that empathy and that compassion. And when we started one-on-one, I went through the whole program, and it was so helpful. And I found my tinnitus is quite complex, and I found a
Yeah.
sound that was really helpful. And the biggest problem for me with tinnitus was not being able to go to sleep.
Mm.
And I already had problems with insomnia. I'm a night owl, and my tendency is to stay up late. And the trouble is, I don't get tired, so I stay up later and later and later. And and so falling asleep, which had already been a problem for me with the tinnitus, just seemed impossible. The only way I could get myself to sleep before I found Otto was to play this, when I think about it, it's really ridiculous online game called, what was it called? Lily's something or other, Lily's Garden.
Okay.
And and it was enough to engage my mind. And so I would play that until I was exhausted. That's the only way I could fall asleep.
Oh,
So it did get me through a very difficult time, but it was not the answer,
no.
obviously, because I was not getting enough sleep. So the so not only did I find this great program, but the all the masking device, masking sounds, and I just felt everything that Otto was doing was so right on target. And I also loved that I could be in touch personally with people, with the Otto staff, and do videos with them. And I just was just thrilled by that. So I was doing much, much better with the Auto app. And when and then I had gone through the whole program and used it every night before I went to sleep, and also used the I fell asleep with the masking device. I had special uh hearing, I mean,
Earphones, yeah.
yeah, soft earbuds, so I could fall asleep with them. And I also really liked the feature that had a timer on it, so it wouldn't be playing all night. It
Yeah.
would shut off at a certain time, and all kinds of details like that I just thought were so great. And I was doing much better. I was sleeping better, get having an easier time falling asleep. But when the one-on-one therapy was offered, I thought, this 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 could be the icing on the cake. This could be just what I need to, put to maximize my
Yeah.
experience. And so I attended a webinar, question and answer webinar,
Very
and
much like this one.
yes, yes, with Lily. And
Yeah.
as I told Lily when I talked to Lily, I said, Lily, you're my hero,
Oh,
because you're the kind voice that I hear every night before I
she
fall
is.
asleep. And your voice is so wonderful to listen to, and so comforting and encouraging. And so I was excited to meet these people, to meet Lily and talk to her. And at that webinar, where where the one-on-one was being introduced, and I think, was it Ed Farrar? Was he there too? I think he was there too. And so we could hear about the one-on-one therapy and then ask questions. And so after that, I signed up, and I had 3 sessions with you, and they were absolutely the icing on the cake, more than the icing on the cake. So the combination of the app and the one-on-one sessions with you, really, I've reached a point where I never dreamed I could get to this point. Honestly, I
Oh,
never
bless you.
dreamed. So that my tinnitus is, I've habituated, it's very manageable. I'll I'll be going through my day, and I'll notice the tinnitus, and I'll think, well, that's kind of annoying, and then I'll go on and doing whatever I was doing.
Something.
So it's not debilitating. I
It
I
doesn't
couldn't have
doesn't stop
believed
you. Yeah.
I couldn't have believed that I could reach that point, but I feel like if I can reach this point, anyone can.
Well, and thank you for all of that, Betty. And I think that we have to also recognize that when we do the one-to-one coaching, when we have the app, you're doing all the work. I mean, we're just sitting here talking to you about it and supporting you, but you have to do the work, and you've done remarkably well. I mean, I'm so proud to sort of listen to your story, because you've done so well. And from being in that very dark place where you were at the beginning of the year, and it's now June, and you're sort of, and I spoke to you a couple of, I think a month or so ago. It's a while ago now, and you were doing so well. So I'm really pleased for you, and I'm glad that we've been able to sort of help you to get there. And yes, you're definitely right about Lily. She is so important to Otto, and her voice. And so many people say that her voice is so calming and so reassuring. But it is that human contact that I think we're very keen on supporting. It's not just, I had somebody this morning say, "Oh yes, that bot answered me," and I was like, "What bot? We don't have any bots. We don't have
Yeah,
chat bots. It's a person. It will be Lily emailing you back, or Jake emailing you back, or Ed emailing you back. It will be one of us that's talking to you. We're still we're still a very small team, but we all take responsibility to reach out to the people that we're working with, and it's all really important. Got a couple of questions, Betty. I'm just going to check what they
sure.
are. Okay. So Gemma says, "Thank you for summing up your experience. I've also different sounds, so it gives me hope." And she also says she was in a dark place, but she was getting better. Gemma, I think that Betty's story resonates with lots of people, where lots of us have different sounds, and the tinnitus changes. It's really hard to pin it down and to get used to it. And I think that's something that lots of people experience. Betty, what would you say to somebody like Gemma?
Well, about having multiple kinds of
Different,
tinnitus
yeah,
in
yeah.
your brain. Well, I'm really glad to hear that it's getting better for her.
Hmm.
And I, from my experience, obviously, I where I've got these multiple tinnituses, and that it slightly changes over time. This tritone sometimes is actually a perfect fourth, but then sometimes it's an augmented fourth, which is a tritone, so it changes. So I think that can be a little challenging if you have just a tinnitus that just stays steady. That's one thing, but if you have a tinnitus that keeps changing a little bit
Alternating.
and fluctuating, and there are some days when it sounds louder to me than others, and for some reason when I'm in my car, it just sounds louder then. So, but even though I'm having these changes, it I've gotten used to the fact that it changes. So the habituation and all the tools that you give us for habituating definitely makes a huge difference for when you have this whole what is it I like to tell people. I'll say that I something about cacophony in my brain. My brain is filled with cacophony,
Yeah, yeah.
but I've learned not to I've learned to ignore it, to not pay attention to it. It's there, it's in the background, and it's to me, it's like a miracle
Mm.
that it's no longer driving me crazy. So I would say to Gemma, is that her name?
Yeah.
Yes. So stick with it, and and I believe that it can only get better for her.
Good. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean it's important to sort of mention, I think, that Betty as a musician comes from her brain's understanding of what the tinnitus signals are as intervals and music, and she can explain that it's a C and an F and whatever. And we can't always do that. But for musicians, sometimes hearing tinnitus goes back to how we understand sound, and our brains are trying to make sense of the signal that's happening within our auditory cortex. So it's finding all of those sounds in our sound library, in our memory of sounds, and going, oh, that sounds like a C, that sounds like a S, that sounds like a ch, and trying to make sense of them so that it then sends another part of the brain, the understanding sound part of the brain, what that sound is. And that's why some people, like Betty, will hear discordant tones and intervals. Other people will hear voices, other people will hear snippets of music, other people will hear hissing or ringing. My particular tinnitus sounds like a dial-up tone, so it's a mechanical kind of noise. It's not a very pleasant noise at all. Um, and people will understand sound in a very different way. We've got some more questions, so I'm just going to go to the questions, Betty. Right, so Christine says, thank you, Betty. I can totally understand where you're coming from. I am 3 months in my tinny journey and are hopeful that I can come to learn to live with it and start to live my life again. And she's in Houston, but she's originally from Manchester.
Ah,
So that's it.
well,
And
great.
yeah, and Gemma says thanks again, and that she's also on a one-to-one therapy thing as well.
Oh, good.
Yeah, Nancy says my tinnitus is louder in the car and at night even with sound. So with tinnitus being louder in the car, I think one of our meetings, Betty, was in your car when you were visiting some friends.
Yes,
Because
that's
that was
right.
the only place you could get an internet signal.
Yeah, right.
I think, yeah. I mean, the acoustics in a car are such that it does shield you from the outside noise. So a bit like having a hearing loss or blocking up your ears, you're always going to hear your tinnitus, your internal resonance louder. So
Interesting.
it's not unusual that when you change spaces, whether you're in a big echoey room, when you're in a little tiny room, when you're in a
Hmm.
car with lots of soft dampening acoustic sounds, that
Mm.
we're going to hear our tinnitus louder, we're going to hear our tinnitus more. So
Is that?
it's not
Oh, sorry.
unusual that people say that. Sorry, Betty.
Go ahead. I
So
just wanted to ask, is that similar to when you put a seashell against your ear and you can hear the whooshing noise, which I've heard is your blood circulation? Is that similar?
you're just hearing, yeah, that resonance, that whole thing, yeah, and the seashell thing is very much the same. But when people put their hands over their ears, or when they have a hearing loss which isn't allowing sound in as much, you'll find that when you wear your hearing aids, you're bringing in more sound. You don't hear your tinnitus quite so loudly because you're getting more ambient noise. But when you're in an
Hmm.
acoustically dampened area, like if you were to go in a really well furnished room and then go into a real sort of empty hall, like a concert hall or a community centre or a church,
Mm.
which is very echoey, then your tinnitus you might feel that your tinnitus changes. At night time, it's the same thing. Lots of people say I can manage my tinnitus in the daytime, but in nighttime it seems worse, and that's because there isn't enough distracting sounds, and the brain is because the brain is listening to the tinnitus and working hard trying to work out where the sound is coming from. It's very sensitive to sound. It's listening, it's trying to work out what's going on. So of course when there is no outside sound, you're going to hear your tinnitus more. So that it's not that your tinnitus has got louder necessarily, although sometimes our tinnitus does change in volume and in
Mm.
pitch, but it's that experience is that there isn't enough sort of external sound. Um, and
Makes sense.
yeah, and Christine says that she's been looking at going into the one-to-one program as well, so that'll be great. Um, Christine also says she finds riding a bicycle. Um, oh yes, when she's riding a bicycle, the wind bothers her, even though she's not a fast rider. So she started wearing sort of earplugs. And I think that's sensible. Lots of people say that wind noise um is exacerbating. Yeah, yeah. Somebody called Kay says, I have strange tinnitus. The less noise, the better my tinnitus is. But
Mm.
I'm presuming you mean the less outside sounds, the better your tinnitus is. Some people have found that they feel that their tinnitus is reactive to sound. So when there's lots of sound, their tinnitus increases, and that when there's not lots of sound, their tinnitus decreases, which is the opposite of what we just talked about. Tinnitus is so individual and so different, and that's why there's not one single sort of cure or point of cure, because it's all about your emotional reaction to the tinnitus. And rather than focus on what the tinnitus is doing, we need to focus on our reaction to it, because otherwise we won't pay attention to it, and then we can learn to not ignore it, but recognize that it's there, but not allow it to interfere with our day and our life and getting our lives back and getting on with things. And I think that's part and parcel of how we can carry on living even though we have tinnitus. It doesn't need to stop us getting on with things. We have some more questions. Let's have a look. Yep, that's Kate just saying thank you very much. Okay, so Betty, I know that you're quite well connected to the ATA, the Tinnitus Association in America, and that you've also done some work with people about auditory training and learning to listen through hearing aids. There are a lot of people with hearing loss that haven't got hearing aids and don't have hearing aids but have tinnitus. Um, we often find that 80% of people with a hearing loss will have um, tinnitus as well. And so it's a combination of both. How do you find your hearing aids help with your tinnitus? Because I know you can stream with your hearing aids now, can't you?
I do. Yes, I can. Actually, for this webinar, I'm on my smartphone because it connects with my hearing aids with Bluetooth, which is fantastic. I must say, I met a guitarist with severe hearing aid. I mean, severe hearing loss, and he was very helpful. He told me about getting Bluetooth hearing aids that could connect with the phone, and he said it changed his life. It took me a little while to get around to getting an iPhone, but luckily I got it right when the pandemic was starting, and that was great because one of the ways I got through the pandemic was doing FaceTime calls with friends and being in some groups. I had a crafts group I was in, I still am, and a book group, and also the Boston chapter of the Hearing Loss Association of America meetings, and also the national organization had webinars. And so having that connection, that hookup was has really been helpful. And the fact that I can be on my phone and talk to you in London is just incredible to me.
Yeah.
And I have to say though that I don't I don't think it's made it's definitely helped with uh with accessibility, but it hasn't, I don't think it's really made a difference in terms of the
To your
tinnitus.
tinnitus. No, no, that's interesting. Um, and the reason that hearing aids are often the first port of call for tinnitus is that we used to think that tinnitus was a hearing problem. And as I say, lots of people with tinnitus will have a hearing loss, but there are lots of people with tinnitus that don't have a hearing loss or have very good hearing, like musicians who have trained their ears to listen really, really well. And we quite often find that people who are musicians or who use language, so telephonists, audio typists, people who use their hearing really, really um, and have trained their ears to listen really well, tend to
That's
tend to experience tinnitus in a very different way because
that's
they're
so
already.
interesting. That's so interesting. And I noticed when like when I'm with my friends, this is before I had tinnitus, when I was with my musician friends, and we would be walking on the street, and a siren would go by, like a fire truck or a police siren, we would immediately put our hands over our ears, but nobody else was doing it. So it made me realize that I think our if you've been trained music, trained in music, your ears are actually a little different.
Yeah, yeah. And it means you're more sensitive to sound. So because you're more sensitive to sound, you notice any changes and you're more sensitive to any changes in sound. And I think that's really important when we think about working with people to habituate to tinnitus, is that that's a whole different kind of thing because you come from sound and hearing sound from a very different perspective. Um, One of the things that we do with the one-to-one with Otto is that we look purely at the person, and we start from where you are and that person-centeredness, and that
Yes.
carries through with the app to the extent that we can do person-centered stuff with the app. But it's very much that my therapeutic approach is that we start from the individual because everybody will experience tinnitus differently. There are lots of studies that look at similarities with people with tinnitus. Um, there's a lot of work that suggests that people with tinnitus have more anxiety or they have a tendency to be more introspective, but that's not always the case. There isn't one size fits all to tinnitus or to tinnitus therapy. I'm going to start pulling us to a close. So if there's any more questions, I think we may have another question. Let me just check.
I just want to add, say that, underscore that the individual as you say, everyone is different. Having that individual connection with you was was so helpful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Being
Okay. Sorry, Betty.
just being seen as an individual in my own individual situation, and as you say, everyone's different, so that was
Yeah.
really helpful.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So the last question of the evening is somebody, I don't know your name, I'm sorry, it says anonymous, says, I have trouble reading print as my tinnitus is worse, so I've switched to audiobooks. What is your experience? Betty, what do you think about reading and audiobooks?
Well, I
What do you
love to read. I love to read and I love audiobooks. Unfortunately, one of my challenges right now is I have moderate to severe hearing loss, and as I get older, my hearing loss gets worse. And I think I also have some hyperacusis, which is hearing when I hear sounds, I hear noise as well. And so sadly, I don't find the clarity of audiobooks. I don't find audiobooks have enough clarity to be able to listen to them unless it's a really unusual narrator with fantastic diction, which I have to say, the best narrators are from your side of the pond because of diction, because of good diction. So, so there's really some wonderful narrators like I'm trying to remember his name. He did the Harry Potter books. Um,
Oh, I can't remember who did those.
for the narrator,
Yeah.
Dean. I think his last name might be Dean. Anyway, I really miss that. So I think it's great that that comment, the person who made that comment is able to enjoy hearing audiobooks, and I
Yeah.
wish I could. And one of my quests is to find some kind of way that I can enjoy audiobooks again.
Hmm. I think that's really an important point. Is the quality of sound is really important, and if your tinnitus gets in the way of your hearing as well, that can exacerbate that issue. I think sometimes when people are reading, they are in quiet, and of course, if you're in quiet or in quiet environments, tinnitus will be louder. I think that playing something in the background, whether it's an urban noise, so it sounds like you're in a coffee shop quietly, just quietly somewhere in the background, or traffic or something like that, might not distract you from reading, but will distract your brain enough to find that there's sound around. And sometimes those kind of little tricks can really help. But yes, lots of people find that they miss physically reading a book because they'll be reading in quiet environments. And so if you can adjust that environment so that it's comfortable for you, and by that I mean auditory comfortable for you, then that certainly might help. Okay, well, all that's left for me is to say thank you to Betty for your time. And it's so lovely to see. Oh, no, we've got another question. Sorry, Betty. Somebody said, what are your favorite sessions that you like to use on Otto?
Oh, what are my favorite sessions?
Yeah. What do you,
So, so my favorite sessions, there was one about trains, and then
mindfulness trains? Yeah.
there was one about where you do something with your hands as you do the
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I like that one where you go like that, and then
Yeah.
you do the opposite as you do the breathing that goes with it. And then there was a kind of basic one. I'm afraid I don't remember the name of it, but it was doing the breathing, and I think it was basically doing the breathing. Um, and it was Lily's voice was so comforting, and also found that the breathing, the counted breathing, I use it for things other than I don't need to use it for tinnitus anymore. but I use it for other things in my life, like when I get stuck in traffic or something like that. So a lot of those techniques are valuable in other areas of life too. They're good
Yeah.
to learn.
Yeah, they're very good for dealing with traffic. Christine says that the man's name who read the audiobook was somebody called Jim Dale.
That's it. Yes, Jim Dale.
So
He's
thank you,
great.
Christine. Thank you, Christine. Okay, well,
Mhm.
Betty, it's so lovely to see you again. Jake is going to put on a slide so that we can talk about the one-to-one coaching. If you're not part of the one-to-one coaching, the one-to-one support, face-to-face support, we do have a special offer this month, which is 30% off. There's the code to use. If I'm going to speak really quickly, if you want more information, you're more than welcome to email us with the email that you use to sign up, and somebody will get back to you. It will be a person, it will not be a chatbot. We are all people. But yes, it will give you this current package gives you access to the full access to the app, a personalized therapy program, 24/7 access to tech support. And again, that's supported by people, and two one-to-one coachings in a month. We've got a small team of practitioners now who are expert tinnitus coaches. I've worked very closely with them. We've only chosen the best people that we could find to deliver the therapy. I'm very conscious that we need to make sure that we give you the best that we can. So if you're interested in signing up, then please do. Thank you, Jake. If you want to close that up. And then all that's left is for me to say thank you for all of you for attending today, and for any questions. If there are any questions that I haven't got to that are particular, then I'm more than happy to answer them. And drop us an email, and myself or one of the team will get back to you. Thank you for Jake for running the 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 show behind the scenes. As always, Jake is our sound chap. He is there. He is. Hello, Jake. Um, and he's a mine of brilliant information and has been exceptional in putting some of my crazy ideas of why don't we get sound that moves around into practice. So I'm glad that you can all get to meet Jake as well. And more than anything, I want to say thank you to Betty for spending time and being such a brilliant guest and an advocate for Otto. We're very grateful for your support, Betty, and I'm really pleased that you're doing so well. So thank you, everybody. Sleep well, take care of yourself, and if you need anything, we are here. All right. Thank you very much. Bye bye now.